I can't quite remember the exact moment where this idea came to be, but the general idea I was working with way back in the very early stages of what would eventually become Afraid to Speak was I was fascinated by the idea of there being a physical manifestation of depression. It came from, my own personal dealings with it, just the weight of it, the struggle with it, the fight with it, and all that. And I sort of got more and more intrigued by, well, what if it was a person instead of just being this thing? What if it was a human being that you interacted with? And from that, the story developed. But the earliest sort of spark of idea was, the core concept of what if depression was a person? And what if you were dealing with that person whenever depression popped up? Now, other than that concept, I really didn't know what the story was going to be about. And then in 2012, I started just writing and trying to come up with the story of how to fit in this idea I have into a drama. A huge part of me deciding that this was going to be sort of my first feature and deciding that this story about depression, which is a personal struggle for me, was going to be the focus, was actually from John Dunsworth, who a lot of you will know as Leahy from the Trailer Park Boys. In college, he was brought in to sort of teach us a little bit of the ropes of the whole filmmaking process, but more specifically the acting and writing side of things. He was very specific in this idea of write what you know. The example he had used, I wouldn't go out and write a cop drama because I'm not a cop, so write what you know. And that stuck with me because I knew that, well, doing a feature film was going to be a big step forward. I needed it to be a script that was genuine and that I felt was important. That's what sort of led me to make the decision that, okay, I'm going to make a film about depression because it's something I know. It's something I fight with, it's something I struggle with, and it's something that I believe that I can write honestly about. I knew the central idea of what this was going to be about. It was going to be about a guy dealing with depression, sort of having struggles with it, but then facing it head on in the third act. And it being this, again, this physical manifestation, this human being. But at first, it wasn't a normal human being. It was originally this very dark figure that would just sort of follow. It was almost like a shadow. And eventually, after a few weeks of writing, I ended up getting a treatment for what was then called Dark Elephant. At the time, I thought that this was the story to tell. I thought this version of what has been written is what the film will be about. And it's the right decision, it's the right call. I've cracked the code. Reading it now, it screams of a very immature writer and a very immature human being trying to force this silly, silly love story into a film that is just bad. To explain the title, it was sort of a play on words with the elephant in the room phrase, this being the dark elephant, and because depression was going to manifest itself as a shadowy figure, that would be the dark elephant. Get it? Don't worry, I think it's stupid too. So the original idea of Dark Elephant was basically this. Luke, who would eventually become Nolan, played by Taylor Olson, is dealing with a bad breakup because his girlfriend cheated on him, and now he's very sad and he's dealing with this thing, so he decides to take a load off and then go stay at the family camp, and then this big love triangle starts between him, his ex, and this new girl, and then just stuff happened. But also in there was this physical manifestation of depression, which played absolute second fiddle to this immature, silly idea that was very much coming from somebody who was clearly 19 years old. So in this version of the film, Luke couldn't jump off this waterfall. I don't know why I was so stuck on this idea of him taking a leap off a waterfall, like to symbolize this big leap into the future. But eventually he jumped off the waterfall that he couldn't jump off of at first, and it was with this new girl. And then everything worked out, and then oh my God, it was this great thing. And wow, what a great metaphor for this. And then yeah. Anyways, the script sucked. Unfortunately, at the time, I didn't realize that that was a horrible idea. That was all hindsight. So once I dropped the idea of Dark Elephant, the script process then became expanding this idea of this cheating plot and this love triangle plot and all this crap. The next process in this, I think I started to turn towards this becoming something that was actually not complete garbage. The idea behind depression taking the physical form started to take shape and started to take over the film in a good way. I think its focus started to become much clearer, and this struggle between Nolan and depression itself was just much more apparent now. It was pushing the story along instead of, you know, sitting on the bench waiting for this cheating love story to go away. And it became more of a story between Luke, who at this time I believe was renamed to Hayden, and the character of Ellie, who I believe at the time was still Emma. Between them, as well as depression, you know, becoming that third major character. And this also introduced the idea of a grandfather character, which eventually in the final film would be Bill. But it began to take shape in a way that it was supposed to. You know, there's these points about the past, and how maybe the character of Hayden, how he was struggling to understand where this all started, where this depression came in, how it had basically dictated a lot of his life, and how he had never really taken the time to confront this thing. So the story was starting to take shape. It was still nowhere near where it needed to be, but it began becoming something. After the Unwelcome Guest run through with these scripts, I had started asking some friends of mine for help in terms of sort of shaping this story, and I was sharing it more. I was letting people read the script. Two of those people who were incredibly helpful were Tyler Reed and Chelsea Camo. Chelsea ended up being the DOP on the film, as well as one of the producers, and Tyler was just a huge help in really showing me the importance of this grandfather character, because I remember us having conversations about how the grandfather and the main character would interact with one another in the camp, because eventually there was this big fight, this big blowout, and I remember it going from really not consequential at all to the story, and then becoming something that was very, very important, you know, something that we couldn't remove because it was so ingrained within the heart of the story. So between those two, I started understanding the film more and getting a much better grasp on where it needed to go. Now, something you've heard me talk about a lot already is this idea of a cabin. And if you've seen the final film, there is no cabin. The original intent of this film was to film it in my hometown, but more specifically at a lake that I grew up around, which was Barrington Lake in the South Shore of Nova Scotia. I really desperately wanted to make a film in my hometown, and I was ready to do that, and I wrote the film specifically with locations in mind that I knew about. Eventually that didn't happen, but that's where this story, you know, existed for a very, very long time, until probably about a month and a half before we shot what would become Afraid to Speak. Once the film was in the Unwelcome Guest stage and also teetering and morphing into Unbreakable Chain, which was its fourth title, there were things in it that were a bit ambitious, and I'm not sure I knew exactly how I was going to film it on a super low budget at the time. There was a moment where Hayden, who would eventually become Nolan, was going to crash his four-wheeler because he got distracted by depression. I mentioned before the waterfall, like we were going to have two people jump off a waterfall. I, to this day, don't know how I was going to do that, and more specifically where, because there are no waterfalls in Barrington Passage. But there was still sort of these remnants of a very immature film. The story was shaping up, and what would eventually become Afraid to Speak was starting to peek its head sort of out of the shadows, but it was still in a place of just, this is, reading it now, bad, immature guy in his early 20s trying to be deep storytelling. But the core idea, which was the sort of spark to all of this, that being the physical manifestation of depression, really got legs near the end. You know, it started to work really well. Problem was everything outside of that was not good. But at this time, with Unbreakable Chain at this point in, I would say probably early 2014, the script I felt was done. So the characters of Nolan, Ellie, and Sam, who I had named Depression Sam, they were all in place, so it was time to cast them.